This webinar on Oxford Discover is brought to you by the Professional Development Department at Oxford University Press, Pakistan. Here are some links for online help with Oxford Discover. We'll try and run them.
Make the most of your Oxford Discover 2nd edition course by using online practice with Teachers Resource Centre. Get all your Oxford Discover 2nd edition teaching resources in one place online. Sign in with your Oxford ID. An access card can be found in the Teacher's Guide within your Teacher's Pack, with clear instructions on how to log in. The Teachers Resource Centre is hosted on the online practice component of the course. The Teachers Resource Centre contains material including worksheets, video and audio, and can be found under the Resources tab. Online practice allows you to assign activities and monitor your learners' progress, and can be found under the Classroom tab. Here you are able to track students' overall scores in vocabulary, reading, listening, writing and grammar. Oxford Discover 2nd edition includes an assessment for learning package to effectively measure students' progress in all areas of the course. The course also introduces 21st century skills assessment worksheets that allow you to track student creativity, communication, collaboration and critical thinking skills. You will also have access to the Teacher's Guide and teaching notes to help you use the course in the classroom, as well as grammar book teaching notes to help your students to improve their grammar, plus extensive support for teaching with the writing and spelling books. The Teachers Resource Centre hosts a wide range of worksheets from grammar and vocabulary to spelling lists. These worksheets are easy to download, and some even come with instruction sheets to clearly explain how to use this material in class. You will also have access to specific phonics worksheets, resources and guides that will give additional literacy support at levels 1 and 2. Correlation guides are available that give information about Oxford Discover and the Common Core State Standards, the Common European Framework of Reference and the Primary Years Programme. The Teach 21st Century Skills with Confidence videos provide tips to help develop your students' skills in creativity, communication and collaboration and critical thinking.
The term 21st century skills is becoming more and more a part of the classroom. But what exactly are 21st century skills?
The Teaching Strategies for Oxford Discover videos provide practical lesson demonstrations and course-specific teaching guidance. They include tips, tricks and ideas that you can implement in class today. We hope you enjoy teaching with Oxford Discover 2nd edition.
Here are the session outcomes for this webinar. We will help you understand the integrated learning approach offered by the book, gain familiarity with 21st century skills, learn to use effective teaching tools embedded in Oxford Discover, and discuss reading and writing strategies. Language is made up of 4 core skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Listening and reading are receptive skills, whilst speaking and writing are productive skills. There is help in Oxford Discover for a complete structure to develop oral and written skills in your students. What are 21st century skills? How can we bring them into our classroom teaching? The key features of this series: an inquiry-based approach to learning with a big question chart to begin each unit with, and video clips which provide an introduction which forms the basis of every unit and taps into the students' natural curiosity. It will help your students achieve near-native fluency in English. There's online practice for home learning support. Oxford Discover also gives teachers integrated learning tools to support 21st century skills. The complete structure consists of student books 1 to 6 that come with workbooks, along with plenty of activities and tasks for students to engage in active learning. For the students, there's online practice as well, and Oxford Discover can be used in conjunction with Oxford Read and Discover and Oxford Read and Imagine. For the teacher, there's an integrated teaching toolkit which offers a complete plan for each lesson, assessment tools, a big question DVD, and online help. There are audio CDs available, iTools, a teacher website, picture cards for visual learning, and colorful posters. The DVDs introduce each topic, stimulating students to think about the big question for discovery, exploration, observation, and communication. And it allows teachers to monitor and evaluate student progress in a range of different ways. So Oxford Discover provides a complete system of support for the child at home and at school. There's a parent website for home learning support. The components of the book. For a quick recap, we have the student book, the workbook, a workbook with online practice, integrated teaching toolkit, Oxford iTools for digital classroom resources, CDs, cards, posters, and a parent and teacher website. How is language acquired? Language is a process of immersion where students get engaged in an environment where they develop facility for a language by the way it's taught and spoken around them. The expectations are clearly laid out in the form of targets, so students know what they need to learn. They reflect with responsibility on the tasks at hand, figure out the need gap between what they know and what they need to learn. There are tasks and activities that engage students in the active learning process through 21st century skills, which are critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration. And there is plenty of demonstration and modeling, for example, of pronunciation, that teachers can use through iTools to help their students in class. The key principles of Oxford Discover are language and literacy skills, 21st century skills, and inquiry-based learning. According to Fortune 500, the top skills sought by employers back in 1970 were very basic: reading, computation, writing. At the turn of the century, employers started looking for interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills, teamwork. Our books incorporate these three skills that are sought after today. Here's a link to help you take a tour of a unit from Book 1. Let's take an example of a page from Unit 3 and 4. It starts with a big question: where can we see colors? Students will watch the video for observation. The next step is for students to explore, to observe and explore. The third step would be to discover and use communication and collaboration in class to enhance learning. They would look at the colors. Teachers might want to ask, why is the sky blue? What else do they see around them that might be blue? And link learning to students' daily life and examples from the things around them. They would then look at the big picture and draw conclusions about it. What is the weather like? Why is there a bit of snow along with sunlight? Where do we normally find hot air balloons? What are they used for? Can you identify all the colors on this page? Can you see two things in your classroom that are the same color? The idea is to develop critical thinking and communication skills. The scope and sequence of these books includes reading with a concentration on vocabulary building, grammar syntax. There's listening with demonstration and modeling. There's ample opportunity to practice speaking, and there's help with writing skills. In Unit 3, for example, we have these colors where students have an interactive tool to tap into. Listen and point to the words. Listen again and say the words. They get pronunciation help. They identify colors, and they're involved in a bit of color mixing in the activities that follow. Effective teaching strategies in Oxford Discover would include vocabulary building through a spiral approach, where students are exposed to high-frequency words. There's elicitation, where the teacher provides a word such as gorgeous and places it in context in a sentence with an example, and then asks what other words could you use for gorgeous. My mom is gorgeous. What's another word you could use for that? Perhaps a child would say pretty. Another one would say beautiful. Another one would say attractive. Vocabulary is built in an inductive way through speaking and elicitation in class in this way, and in a contextual way by providing examples of how those words might be used. You could choose some of the words from the unit and try that out in your classrooms. Oxford Discover also encourages teachers to link learning to the student's experience. What is experiential learning? It involves hands-on practice through the activities and tasks in the book, embodied learning, where a demonstration of, let's say, a grammar function could be given. An example would be if we were to teach the function, if we were to teach parts of speech, we could have students standing there. One would be a noun, one would be a verb, one would be an adverb, one would be an adjective. And teachers could say the word out loud. The adjective would raise his or her hand and say adjective. Another student standing there would raise the hand if the teacher said the word table. Student would raise his or her hand and say noun. When we demonstrate a function of language in class visually, students find it easier to retain the concept. There is also inquiry in Oxford Discover with lots of questions that children can answer in class and get help from their peers by discussing it with each other, and real life examples from their experiences. Grammar is taught in a simplified way. It's embedded within the context of themes in each unit implicitly, enabling students to use language in natural and communicative ways. And embodied learning techniques can be taught to teach grammar and parts of speech, or could be used for punctuation, prepositions, where students can have teachers. An example of embodied learning would be if teachers could have children hiding in different places in the classroom. One could be under the table, one could be on the table, one could be behind a door, one could be on top of a chair, and that's how we would talk about prepositions and demonstrate that concept rather than using definitions to explain what prepositions are. Grammar in use. Listen and sing along. There's rhythm and rhyme to help with retention. There's a black rabbit in my yard today. One little rabbit, he wants to play. Here's another rabbit, say hello. There are two black rabbits in my yard today. The grammar function being taught in context here is there is and there are. For younger children, again, we can use embodied learning. Have two children stand on one side of the classroom and a single child at the other end of the classroom, and demonstrate there is one child standing on the left, there are two children standing on the right. Visual learning helps children retain the concept quicker. Let's move on to the next slide. We've got a worksheet accompanying the grammar function. There is, there are. Here children get plenty of opportunity to practice what they have learned, and teachers get a chance to assess the children's learning. There's a picture here that they are asked to observe carefully and write their own personal response. There's a black hamster. They will look closely at the picture and write yes or no. There's a lizard in the picture. They would look closely and write yes or no. Here is how children learn through personal responses from observation and exploration. Next, we move on to adjectival order from Book 4, Unit 11, page 55. What's wrong with the following sentence? He was growing bacteria in glass round small dishes. When grammar is taught in an inductive way, it's usually played by ear. Children would find it rather odd. He was growing bacteria in glass, round, small dishes. They would know that the correct order would be he was growing bacteria in small round glass dishes. But if they don't, there is a clear structure to teach adjectival order, which is opinion first, size, age, shape, color, and material. There's ample practice for students to reinforce this learning. Moving on to reading and writing, we have fiction and non-fiction texts from different genres and themes across the curricula. Within fiction, there's fairy tales, fables, historical fiction, and realistic fiction for children to become aware of different styles and structure in English language skills. In non-fiction, there's brochures, magazine articles, websites, newspapers, and advertisements. They would understand that advertisements use snappy language and catchy phrases. Newspapers are usually written in more formal language, and the structure employed is the what, when, where, why, and how. With websites, again, there's more figurative language, snappy and short sentences. If we move on to reading, there's a pre-reading task that children would do before they actually start reading the text. They would look at the title, Jake's Blue Room, and predict from the title what the passage might be about. Now, an interesting strategy to use here would be to link the passage to students' own experiences first, have them talk about their own room, what color is the room, how big is their room, use adjectives to describe their room. One would say my room is big and round, one might say my room is white and airy. Teachers could elicit as many adjectives as possible, predict what Jake's blue room would be like, and then move on to discussing what it actually is like. It's big and blue. And they could ask the students to replicate the sentence with different adjectives. And then the next step would be to ask students what they want to know. To spur critical thinking skills, teachers might want to ask, if you were to meet Jake, what would you ask him about his room? Does he like his room? What kind of activities does he use his room for? Do you think he studies in his room? Does he play in his room? Or does he just use his room to sleep on his bed? Who does he share his room with? Who do you share your room with? Engaging children in speaking practice is really important in developing facility in the language. Next, we move on to the hamster family and talk about what hamsters are all about. I wonder what hamsters eat. I wonder what color hamsters could be. Can they be brown and white? Are they grey and black? What do we want to know about this hamster family? We then move on to poems. Out in the garden, up in the tree, there are 6 butterflies, can you see? Children will learn to count. They will also look at the posters and try to decipher what the animals are doing. They would learn to uncover the hidden meaning in language. These are the building blocks of learning the nuances of the language and learning the implications of texts before they move on to writing skills. They would look at the animals up on the tree. There are 3 purple cats, can you see? Look at the expressions on the cats' faces. Are they running away from another animal? Do they look frightened? Do they look happy? Are they playing together? What do you think they're thinking or feeling? Next, we move on to colors. I like yellow. I like the sun when we have fun. What colors do you like? Teachers might want to ask. Do you have fun in the sun? Do you prefer sunshine to rain? So, to recap, before reading, teachers would want to introduce the text. and predict what the text might be all about. Examine the visuals and link what the children see to their own experiences and things around them in the classroom and perhaps in the playground outside. During reading, they would listen carefully to the text being read out by the teacher or another student in class. They could contextualize the text and decipher the hidden meanings in the sentences, focus on vocabulary and grammar, and then apply different approaches to reading the text. Some could read together in groups of 2. They could read in pairs. They could read together in pairs, or they could read in groups of 3 or more. They could also read to each other or individually. After reading, they would complete the activities and the tasks given in the book, and also get enough practice with the tasks in the workbook. And then teachers would want to move on to assessing whether there is a deep understanding of the content by asking students to summarize what they have read or talk about how they feel about it. There are 3 ways of reading. They could read aloud in class individually, or the teacher could read to them. They could read along with each other, or they could read alone to themselves. To recap the stages of teaching reading, there's prediction, there's inference. So for example, if we have a boy who's gone to sleep, let's take an example of Anwar. Anwar has gone to sleep. You might want to ask, using an inquiry-based approach, has Anwar gone to sleep because he is tired? Or do you think he's hungry? Do you think he's gone to sleep because he's not feeling well? Or has he gone to sleep because it's his bedtime and he has school the next day? Inference is about digging deep into a text to decipher the hidden meanings in it. The colorful posters also help students visualize what is being spoken about. So they look at the colors, they look at the expressions on the characters' faces, they look at the setting, and if teachers could use an inquiry-based approach, it would tap into their natural curiosity and help them discover the meaning of what they're reading on their own. Next, they would summarize what they read. So the idea is to recap all the key points in a passage, make connections with their own experiences and examples of things around them, and then learn to ask questions. What do they want to know about what they're reading? This is a reflective process in the steps for teaching reading. When we approach reading in this way, we're developing critical thinking skills, information and discovery, interpretation and personal analysis of text. We're learning to construct arguments, we're learning to ask questions, and we're learning to structure our thinking for problem-solving skills. We're also learning to collaborate with each other, share peer learning, show flexibility in our opinions. We're learning to responsibly say to ourselves, this is what we know and this is what we need to learn. We're also learning to give feedback to each other. Then there's communication, where students take turns speaking in class and they learn to listen to each other very carefully. They also learn to present their own ideas in class. The teacher would engage them in conversation so they get ample opportunity to speak and share their views and learn how to participate in a discussion. They also learn how to communicate in different circumstances and in different ways, by asking questions, by sharing ideas, by perhaps disagreeing with a peer's opinion. And the activities develop creativity through idea generation, helping students refine their ideas and correct themselves, encouraging students to have the openness to explore other people's ideas and build upon them, a process which we call scaffolding, and work creatively with others as they go along. This is a little bit of assessment for you to think about. Which of the 4 C's do you think applies to the scenarios below? A student disagrees with the point of view of another. a student summarizes the key points of a passage for the rest of the class. Students work in a group to answer comprehension questions. Students come up with ideas for a new project. Now going backwards, number 4 would be creativity, because the ideas come from innovation. Number 3 would be working in a group, would be collaborating with each other. Number 2, summarizing the key points of a passage, would be communication. And number 1 would be critical thinking or problem-solving skills. Applying 21st century skills in the classroom, teachers might want to test one of the units from Oxford Discover by choosing one of the C's and developing their own hands-on activities to help students apply one of the 4 C's to the units in the book. Critical thinking in Oxford Discover is developed through a process of inquiry and reflection. There are many questions that lend themselves to observation, exploration, critical thinking, and discovery. Students also learn to reflect on their own learning. The big question helps them understand that process of reflection. Where can we see colors? Think about the big question. What do you want to know about colors? Students might want to know what happens when we mix red and green together. We might want to know why the sky is blue and not red. They might want to ask why the grass is green. They might also want to ask each other these questions and note down the thoughts of their peers. That would be a bit of collaborative learning. Then we move on to communication, where they listen and point to the words. They listen again and they say the words. They get pronunciation practice through this. Part B is about critical thinking skills. Read and circle the correct words. An elephant is this color. It's pink or it's grey. They have choices here, fairly straightforward and simple, and they've got to apply their critical thinking skills and circle the correct answer. Next, we move on to listening. Do you like fireworks? Which color fireworks are your favorite? They would listen and they would respond. This is a personal response question. Then we move on to speaking. Do you want to play with me? Sure. Let's color. Okay, good idea. They can build upon this by writing their own dialogues in pairs with each other. There's a word study grammar function here. Nouns are naming words. What nouns can you see around you? What things do you see around you? Make a list of things that you see in your classroom or in your playground, for example. That would be personal response, reinforcing a part of speech. Next, we move on to more visual learning with dialogue. There's blue and there's red. Point on the table. Red and blue make purple. Gus and Billy look at the colors. It's blue, it's red, it's purple. What happens when we mix colors? Students could be encouraged to write a dialogue with speech bubbles exactly like this, in a different sort of way. Perhaps not with colors, but with something else around them. Or they could use this particular concept and write their own responses to what is being said on this page. Next, they move on to a project. Make a color mix chart. How do you mix colors? They could experiment with that in the classroom. That's a bit of a scientific experiment here. There's a video to watch and think more about the big question. Explore the colors in further detail, in groups perhaps, for collaborative learning. They would reflect on what they know about the colors, what they've learned. If there's been any new learning, they would report it, present it to the class or write it down. They would review what they've learned. They would work through the questions in the workbook, and the teachers can reinforce that learning by asking the questions given at the end of each unit. To test understanding and comprehension, there are personal response questions. What did you like about the poems? The red butterfly, the brown birds, the black spider, the green frogs. They get an opportunity to tick what they liked. This is the decision-making part. These are choices given to children to elicit a personal response to learning, to engage them actively in what they've learned, and to understand what they know and what they still need to learn. Match the colors to the things in the poems would be a good assessment to see whether learning has taken place. And then children get to think and talk about the poems perhaps with each other or generally as a class. Can you find the words in the poems that end with the same sound? Do the authors of the poems like colors? What else do they like? Those are critical thinking questions that encourage children to give different answers with a personal response. They get to share learning with each other. These tasks provide opportunities for self-correction and reflection. Through projects, children get a chance to make presentations in class of what they have learned and what they know, and consolidate learning at home through choice and challenge when they take these projects back home, and when they learn to use what they have learned in the classroom to go home, reflect, and write about it. Oxford Discover also helps them make global connections by exposing them to different cultures, different people, different lands. There are animals that are spoken about, so animal homes. Where do the animals live? Why do we have animals inhabiting different lands? Why don't we have polar bears in Pakistan, for example? They could talk about what animals eat, where they live, and what they need for survival. They would also talk about different seasons all over the world in different countries. They would talk about different kinds of people in different cultures and their homes. How is your home different from someone else who lives in another country or a small village somewhere or a big busy city? These are questions that students need to answer to develop exposure to different kinds of living. We will now move on to a recap of the unit. It incorporates reading strategies, a review of all the learning with a story and a project. There's also an opportunity to build upon writing skills. They would write a letter. They would learn that the first letter of a sentence is capitalized. They're learning this through short sentences in very simple bite-sized ways. Units 3 and 4, where can we see colors, would be recapped through answers to the big question. We can see colors in nature. We can see colors in the sky. We can make and mix colors with paint. We can see colors on animals and in the ocean. We can see colors in the clothes we wear. There's also word study to test the vocabulary that they have learned through the unit. There is a recap of grammar. There are, and prepositions of place that they've learned in these units. Recapping listening strategies that they've incorporated through the tasks, and the opportunity that they've got to speak and make presentations in the class of what they have learned. For teachers, there is a summary of breaking up the lesson into introducing the topic, and at every stage how they would assess the child's learning, set targets, expand the topic, consolidate the learning, and then reinforce it with tasks. Teachers would build a vocabulary bank through elicitation and presenting words within the context of sentences using examples from what the children see around them. They could also use chain writing or scaffolding, where each student writes one short, simple sentence and then passes it on for someone else to write a second and a third and a fourth sentence until they have, as a group or a class, produced one paragraph that can be read out loud. Teachers can also introduce target pyramids, because every child will have a different sort of learning ability. Some students will be able to identify letters and sounds and have some kind of phonemic awareness, but they would stop there. Others would be better at manipulating words and be able to build vocabulary faster. Then teachers would move on to reading fluency and expression. Some students read better than others. Some are better with words. Some students can grasp the nuances of language quicker than others. This is an example of a reading pyramid that teachers can use as a target for reading and writing, and assess children according to the levels on this pyramid. A sample lesson demonstration from Student Book 2, Units 8 to 13 is on this link. If you wish to see a class being taught for hands-on learning, you could go through this link. It's very helpful to understand the different stages of taking children through a unit. Thank you very much for listening. We hope this was useful to you. Goodbye.